Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever looked at, certain behaviors, especially maybe from people in positions of power or just how some big organizations work, and thought, that just doesn't make sense. It seems almost illogical.
Or even worse, sometimes it feels designed to baffle or maybe even humiliate people.
Exactly. Well, today we're doing a deep dive into a really compelling, though maybe unsettling way to look at those kinds of dynamics. It's about recognizing the characteristics of psychopaths, according to one particular source, and their impact, especially within organizations.
Our main source for this is some pretty intriguing audio analysis from Dr. Catherine Horton.
Right. And our mission today is basically to pull out the key insights from her work. Like, what does she say defines a psychopath? How do they, according to her, tend to climb the ladder in different structures?
And then, maybe most importantly, how does this influence actually show up? Because it's often in really surprising, kind of subtle ways, but the effects can be, well, devastating.
Yeah, we want this deep dive to be a useful shortcut for you, the listener. It offers a unique lens, really, to look at human behavior and power dynamics. It's the kind of understanding that could be super helpful, whether you're dealing with your own workplace or just trying to figure out what's going on in the wider world.
Definitely. And what's really interesting about Dr. Horton's perspective is how it helps connect dots, Things that might seem unrelated. It pushes past the surface explanations to look for these underlying patterns.
Hmm.
Her work really digs into this idea that psychopaths, because they supposedly have this innate drive for power and, crucially, zero empathy, they tend to sort of gather at the top, especially in older, very hierarchical, pyramid-type organizations.
And she has a specific term for that, right?
Yes, she calls it deep capture.
Deep capture. That's a strong phrase. So Dr. Horton puts this idea out there early on. Let's break it down. What are the core traits she points to? What makes someone a psychopath in her framework?
Well, the absolute core, the defining thing, and probably the most dangerous, is this profound lack of empathy. They just don't have feelings for other people.
Okay.
Dr. Horton uses this analogy. Think about how you feel about your toaster, or maybe your car. You don't feel empathy for them, right? You use them. Her source suggests psychopaths see and use other people in exactly the same way, just objects.
Wow. Okay, so people as objects. What else?
Then there's this powerful, innate drive for power and control. It's described as this relentless need to climb higher, control more people, and ultimately achieve this deep capture of entire organizations.
And they don't do it alone, presumably.
No, absolutely not. The source highlights how they're masters at finding and using what she calls enablers, people who can help them get what they want. They scout them out and use them like tools or gadgets, as the source puts it.
So this deep capture idea, if I'm getting the source right, it's not necessarily some big planned conspiracy. It's more like something that just happens naturally in certain types of organizations over time because of these psychopathic traits.
That is precisely Dr. Horton's argument. She suggests that in those traditional top-down hierarchical structures, especially the really old, really big ones with loads of layers, this deep capture becomes almost unavoidable. Inadvertible is the word she uses.
Inadvertible. So it's just a consequence of how those systems work and who thrives in them.
Exactly, a natural consequence of their drive for power in systems that reward climbing. And her work actually suggests that many of our oldest, biggest institutions might already be in this state of deep capture by clinical psychopaths.
That's a huge claim, the idea that whole organizations could be fundamentally shaped by this. But the source doesn't just make big claims. It starts with some almost everyday examples, doesn't it? Like military parades. We've all seen them, but probably not thought about them this way.
It's a really interesting starting point. Dr. Horton's work points to the, quote, weird movements. The goose-stepping you see in military parades all over the world. They're very stiff, very unnatural, not how people normally move.
Yeah, totally rigid. Looks quite uncomfortable, actually.
And her interpretation is, well, it's provocative. She argues these movements have basically no function in terms of national security. They don't help defend anything.
So what are they for then?
She says they are purely a power spectacle, a show for the leaders, the psychopaths at the top, according to her view. Think about it. These leaders, maybe physically weaker themselves, watching hundreds, maybe thousands of these really strong, fit soldiers marching past, making themselves look silly just because they're ordered to.
A public display of control.
Exactly. A blatant public demonstration of absolute power over others.
Okay, so if parades are a power spectacle, what about, say, ceremonial military uniforms?
Yeah.
Not the camo gear, but the really elaborate, sometimes pretty odd-looking outfits,
Yeah.
like the London Guards with the huge furry hats.
Or, even more striking, the source mentions the Swiss Guard at the Vatican. Their uniforms are, well, they're often described as clown outfits.
Right. Very colorful, very distinct, and probably useless in a fight.
Absolutely. And the source's take on these ludicrous outfits, Dr. Horton suggests they serve absolutely no purpose except as a signal from one psychopath in charge to others.
A signal. What kind of signal?
It's like saying silently, look at me, look what I can do. I can take these highly trained soldiers, these assassins basically, stick them outside my house and make them wear this. Make them parade in front of everyone, their families, a whole city, looking ridiculous.
So it's about the power to humiliate. A display of ownership.
That's the interpretation. The ultimate power is making others submit to humiliation. And just as a little side note, the source actually looked into the Swiss Guard uniform origin. Apparently, it wasn't Michelangelo, which is a common myth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was designed by a commandant, Jules Rapon, back in the early 20th century, like 1910 to 1921. He was influenced by the painter Raphael, apparently.
Huh. Interesting detail. Okay, so these are kind of warm-up examples, displays of power, humiliation signals. But Dr. Horton's work also offers something more direct, like a test, right? The Mountain View adverts thing.
Yes, exactly. The source talks about this specific 3-minute video. It apparently features a character described as a goat gangster who mistreats women and threatens someone in a police lineup. It sounds pretty strange.
A goat gangster.
Okay.
And the test is how you react to it.
Yeah, the source basically asks you, the viewer, to check your own emotional response. What do you feel watching this?
And what are the expected responses, according to Dr. Horton?
Well, the source explains that a, quote, normal response would range from finding it maybe weird and maybe funny, but a bit dafted, or probably more likely feeling actively sickened, maybe even utterly disgusted, especially by the end.
Okay, that sounds reasonable for unpleasant content. And the psychopathic response?
According to the source, a psychopath might find the whole thing hilarious, or even more disturbingly, potentially sexually arousing.
Sexually arousing how?
The source suggests that for psychopaths who might also be sex offenders, the victim's visible distress, their humiliation, their panic, their fear, even their screaming can unfortunately act as a trigger for arousal.
Wow. That's a really stark difference in reactions. So it highlights the empathy gap again. But you said earlier, not everyone behaving badly is a psychopath. Dr. Horton categorizes behaviors.
Yes, this is crucial in her framework. The source asks us to try and distinguish between 3 types of behavior we might observe. Type A is just normal behavior. Type B is what she calls weaponized morons.
Weaponized morons.
Yeah, described as useful idiots, people who are maybe, as the source puts it, utterly thick or just easily manipulated, who get brainwashed or enabled by psychopaths and then used like a weapon. And then type C is the clinical psychopaths themselves.
Okay, so normal people, manipulated people, and the actual psychopaths pulling strings. And this framework helps analyze real situations, like the WikiLeaks Apache helicopter footage.
Exactly. The source analyzes the audio from that leak, the one from Chelsea Manning, showing the U.S. Apache firing on people in Iraq. Dr. Horton points out the utter lack of care in the soldiers' voices, how they seem to treat it all like a computer game.
Yeah, I remember the commentary was chillingly casual.
Very casual tone, using nicknames for weapons and targets. The source concludes that people acting like that, so detached while others are dying, are likely clinical psychopaths. Or, possibly, a mix of psychopaths and these weaponized morons who've been deeply influenced or brainwashed by them.
And there was another Apache clip the source looked at, right? A pilot singing American Pie.
Yes, a shorter clip, but maybe even more telling in some ways. The pilot is singing this quite iconic song, American Pie, while firing missiles.
Singing while firing missiles.
But it's not just the singing. The source emphasizes that it's a sarcastic song in that context. Dr. Horton argues this shows an extra level of humiliating the victim, actually laughing at the victim while killing them. The source is very direct here, calling it clinical, typical of a clinical psychopath. It says, quote, it doesn't get any more psychopathic than that.
That's incredibly bleak. The source also mentioned analyzing a compilation video, one showing lots of destruction.
Yeah, a video compilation of just things being shot to pieces, blown up, destroyed, but set to really cheerful, empowering, happy music.
Cheerful music over destruction.
Exactly. And Dr. Horton notes the complete absence of any thought for the victims, the people whose homes or lives are being destroyed, combined with what seems like enjoyment of the destruction itself. Now, the source does add a caveat saying it could just be some stupid kid messing around online.
Right.
But it argues that this combination, enjoying destruction, zero empathy for victims, strongly points towards a clinical psychopath being the creator. It fits the pattern described in her framework.
Okay, so these examples are pretty extreme, often related to conflict.
Hmm.
But you mentioned earlier, Dr. Horton's idea is that psychopaths rise in any power structure, not just the military.
Absolutely. Any organization that offers power is potentially susceptible, according to this view. And the source provides an example from the financial world. Lloyd Blankfein, former CEO of Goldman Sachs, during a Senate hearing about the 2008 financial crash.
Ah, yes. What did the source highlight about his behavior there?
It points to what it calls his striking body language. Things like wide eyes and being very aggressive and cutting off the person questioning him, Phil Angelides. The source describes it as showing absolutely no consideration for the feelings of others.
And this was during a hearing about an event that caused, the destruction of thousands of people's lives and the entire U.S. economy. Huge consequences.
Massive consequences. And the source then asks these really pointed questions, almost challenging the listener. If Lloyd Blankfein were a psychopath, would we expect him to behave like that? And, maybe more disturbingly, should it be the case that your pensions are entrusted to men like that? It presents his behavior as potentially indicative within Dr. Horton's specific framework.
It's using these real-world examples to illustrate the theory. There was another one from the EU Commission involving someone called Sabina McNeill.
Yes, a mathematician named Sabina McNeill. She was speaking very passionately, advocating for thousands of children in the UK who were reportedly disappearing or being taken away from their families. The source notes she showed an incredible amount of empathy. Her voice was trembling, a very heartfelt plea.
Okay, so a very emotional, empathetic presentation. How did the committee react, the people running the meeting?
This is where the analysis gets really specific about control tactics. When the audience in the room started applauding Sabina's speech, the person chairing the committee immediately shut it down, saying, "Please respect the committee, do not applaud."
Okay, maybe just procedure.
Well, Dr. Horton's interpretation is different. She argues this isn't about rules or efficiency. It's classic psychopathic control. The source claims psychopaths do not want their victim or the objects around them to network. Applause is instant feedback, it's communication, it creates a wall of agreement.
And psychopaths hate that.
They hate it, according to this source, because it breaks the isolation they try to maintain, it connects people, which threatens their control. The source also points out the panel members' negative facial expressions when Sabina was later given a bit more time to speak, suggesting it's part of a pattern of shutting down unwanted communication.
Okay, wow, so even applause can be seen through this lens of control. We've covered some pretty heavy ground, but the source goes even further, doesn't it? Guantanamo Bay? That's obviously hugely contentious.
It is, and Dr. Horton's analysis frames Guantanamo in a very specific way. She points out the apparent absurdity. The U.S., with its immense military power, holding this relatively small bunch of inmates for years and years, claiming they need to extract vital information.
Right.
And the source asks, skeptically, what sort of information could they possibly hold in their head that would be so relevant after years and years? Especially information that, satellites and drones couldn't find out anyway.
So what's the conclusion drawn?
The source concludes that Guantanamo isn't primarily about information gathering. It's seen as a psychopath power game. A demonstration of, I can do this and get away with it and everybody lets me. It's described almost dismissively as something frilly, meaning it lacks real strategic function, but serves a psychopathic purpose of displaying power. Again, it's important to stress, this is Dr. Horton's specific interpretation.
And within Guantanamo, the source focuses on one particular reported technique, rectal hydration, as an example of this psychopathic display.
Yes. The source describes this alleged method, depriving inmates of water until they're near death, then giving them fluids rectally just to keep their organs from shutting down, essentially prolonging the suffering and control.
That sounds just unbelievably cruel and bizarre.
Utterly bizarre. And Dr. Horton's analysis is that this isn't normal cruelty, nor is it just stupid. She argues it's a psychopath having fun. It displays, in her view, all the textbook features of clinical psychopaths. Why? Because it's humiliating, it potentially has a sexual element of violation, and it's utterly pointless from a functional perspective, but achieves maximum torture. Textbook psychopathic behavior, according to her framework.
So bringing these extreme examples, like Guantanamo and the interrogation methods, back to the main theme of deep capture, What's the final argument the source makes?
Dr. Horton argues very strongly that behaviors like these are indicators of deep capture by clinical psychopaths within powerful institutions, specifically naming parts of the U.S. military establishment in this context.
And why is that seen as so critical?
Because, the source stresses, this constitutes a situation of national emergency. Why? Because psychopaths, by the definition used here, will not act normally. They don't genuinely care about national security that requires empathy for the nation and its people. Their actions are self-serving and ultimately utterly devastating for any organization they control.
So there's a call to action embedded in this analysis.
Absolutely. The source essentially says every single time you come across these things, this total lack of empathy, this humiliation of victims, it is your duty to be aware of what psychopaths are. And it is your duty to speak out. It's a call for awareness and vigilance.
Right. So to wrap this up for our listeners, what does all this mean for you? Well, maybe next time you see something happening in an organization, in politics, even just public behavior that seems off, that feels illogical or pointlessly cruel, or just a strange power play, you now have this framework from Dr. Horton to think about.
Yeah, you can ask yourself, does this actually serve a real purpose? Or could it be, as the source suggests, more about a display of power? A symptom, maybe, of this deep capture idea.
It's definitely a different lens to view the world through.
And here's a final thought to leave you with, building on Dr. Horton's ideas. If, as she suggests, clinical psychopaths do tend to inevitably rise in these older hierarchical structures, what does that mean for our future? Especially as we see new, very powerful global organizations taking shape. Is this deep capture really inadvertible, as she claims?
Or could understanding these patterns, these potential warning signs, actually help us? Could it empower us to maybe design organizations or safeguards differently to mitigate that kind of influence? Something to think about.